Well, here is where we are at today. If you followed along in the last video, you'll know that we took this side apart, got everything stripped down, and then we discovered that the axle hub assembly was a little moist, and I figured, you know what, we're probably going to have bearing trouble on this side too. We better go ahead and have new bearings and seals put into this axle hub assembly as well. Now we need to back up a little bit here and explain what we're actually doing here. The left side, we had an axle seal start leaking. And the seal started leaking because the bearing went. So we took that side apart, sent the axle hub assembly to Seidenstricker. They put new bearings and new seals in the final drive assembly. And then when we put this back together, we put new brake components in on the left side. Just because everything was tore apart and there's no sense in redoing this job a couple years down the road when it is time to replace the brakes on this. So I bought brake components to do both sides and figured that we should do this right side as well, but I didn't have time to do it when we did it, so we are doing it now. I took this side apart and this side is actually in worse shape than the brake components were when we took the other side apart. So there's more material on the outside of this disc than there is or was on the inside. So there's not much left here. So this is where we are at. Now, when we went to take this inner wheel assembly off, I could not get the little wheel to spin in the grooves on the axle. So what I did was I removed the top wedge, and I could not get the center bolt out. The center bolt has a nut on the back side. We loosened that up to allow the wedge to come out. The wedge came out to where it needed to be. Then I went to tighten the bolt back in so that I could get the nut off of it, and it was set up. So we broke it. So we have to dig out this top bolt. And this little wheel here spins on the axle. And I figured we had a couple of things going on. Either this is set up completely, or I figured there was dirt and rust in the groove of the axle and on the teeth of this wheel. And you can see there's not really anything on there. This is just seized up. It's all. Well, we're turning it now. So we've just gotta get after it. But I have forced that bolt before, and I have broke teeth off of this wheel. You can't really put too much force on it without either breaking this wheel or breaking that bolt. Once you break it, you have to figure out what you're gonna do, whether you do it the way we did it or not. But we took the top wedge out, and then that allowed the wheel to drop down. This dropped away from the axle, and then we were able to just pull it right off of the axle. So we're going to need to dig that broken bolt out. We need to remove this piston. There was a fuel line that we had hooked up. We had to unhook that because there's a little elbow fitting on here. We didn't want to break that. And I've got just a pipe plug in there, and it's dripping just a wee little bit. So we're going to get this piston pulled out, remove the O-rings. We'll get everything all set up and ready to go back together. And then maybe tomorrow or the following day, we'll get our axle back, and then we can reassemble the rest of the parts here. So that's what we've got to work on. In order to get this bolt out, we're gonna have to work on it from the back side. There's a wheel weight on there. We're going to have to remove the wheel weight so that I can get down in there and weld some items on there to be able to dig this out, and or be able to heat this hub up so that we can get that out of there. This bolt that broke, the threads were garbage on it, and I don't know where it exactly is, but at any rate, it was quite rusted out, and I just need to get to work here. So, all right. So we have a little bit of a change of pace. Moving straw out of this barn. And Jared kind of thought they needed another truck to haul straw out of here. So I jumped in a truck. I no more than got things figured out on how I was going to get that wheel weight off, and stop doing that, and I come over here to grab a load of straw. Skid steer's creaking a little bit, but it is what it is. So there's about 900 and some odd bales over here, and we've got just enough room to put this in the hay barn, and then we want to get this completely empty and then put the 4 silage trailers in here and get them stacked away for the winter. It is the day after Christmas. All right. All right, so a couple of days have gone past here since we've worked on this project. We ended up moving some straw back from the Cleverly farm, which is several miles away from here. We stored big bales in a machinery barn over on that farm. We had enough room in the hay barn to hold that amount of straw. So we spent 2 days bringing that straw back here, and then the roads are a little wet here now, but next time the roads dry off, we can put those moss trailers away in that barn and some silage trucks as well. So we're back on this project. If you didn't catch the last video, we ended up taking this side of the tractor apart to replace the brake components on this side, because we had an axle bearing go on the other side of the tractor here back during, I don't know if we were doing, I think we were doing fourth cutting. We put new brake components in that side, got new brake components for this side, but we didn't have time to do this side, so we got the tractor back together. Now we are into this side of the tractor. I ended up replacing the piston O-ring. I've got that much done. I've got the housing cleaned off. I scraped some mud off of here to clean that surface up, and found this little piece of material here that went to the backing ring. Here's the piston right here, and then the brake disc itself. I showed you that in the last video, but the brake disc is quite wore. So there was just a very minuscule amount of time left on that, so it's a good thing that we are replacing the components on this side. When we took this apart the other night, we had kind of a battle getting it apart. We ended up breaking a bolt in this wheel hub assembly, which we're going to pull the wheel weight. We've got to dig this broken bolt out of the cast housing. It's probably going to be a real treat to get that out of there, but that's what we're going to go in and try to dig that broken bolt out. Now, I've gotten several comments about how you're correctly supposed to do this rack and pinion style axle assembly. I've had several of you tell me, oh, you got to have the rack on the top. No, you don't. You put the rack on either side, and you don't want a lot of pressure on that gear that's going to spin the axle or ride the hub assembly out. Now, I know there's a lot of professionals that have done a million of these, but I guess I haven't done enough of them to know. But we have found it's easier to put that rack on the side, either the front side or the back side. It doesn't work on the bottom because when you loosen that wedge up, the gear can be far enough away where it will just spin on that axle. If you have it on the top, it's too much pressure on that wheel and it will turn hard. The reason why I couldn't turn this one is because the bolt that has the gear on it is set up. We deal with a fair amount of rust in this part of the country, and that's just what we're dealing with. So that bolt is set up. It doesn't matter which way I had it, my way or the expert's way, it would not have turned. You can try to force that all you want. You end up just breaking it anyways, and it doesn't work. So you take the 3-bolt wedge out, it'll drop down, and then you can pull it off. Yeah. The only time that rack and pinion works is when everything is freed up and brand new. And the only time you can get everything freed up is if you are moving this on an annual basis, and we don't do that. I know some guys, they would move their wheels once or twice a year. They might use a tractor on a moldboard plow from 40 years ago, and then go into side dressing corn. They would move their wheels back and forth constantly, and when you do that, everything works perfectly. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to lift this wheel weight assembly off of the hub so that we can get down in there. I'm thinking I'm going to have to weld stuff on that bolt right here to get it out. If I can't get it out, we'll torch it out, ream the hole, and just put a nut on the back side. It's not a big deal, but the threads were all rusted. I don't know where that broken bolt is. It's got to be here somewhere. I don't know if I threw it out or what I did with it. It's right here. So here is the bolt that broke, and you can see it is very well deteriorated. Gee, Andy, why didn't you replace that? Well, it was just one of them things that we had not taken apart up to this point. So we are going to replace all the hardware on this hub, and it's just an extra step. But what we did is when we got this apart, I need to back up a little bit. When we got this side apart, the axle seal was moist. And I said, you know what, with nearly 11,000 hours on this tractor, the bearing went on the other side, If the tractor only had 4,000 or 5,000 hours on it, we wouldn't even worry about the bearing on this side. But being that seal, the outer portion of the hub extension or the hub assembly was moist, I said, well, that might be a slight indication that we have a bearing that is starting to get a little sloppy on the outside, and it's allowing that axle to drift a little bit in that seal. And this bearing assembly might be short-lived on this side of the tractor. So I took the bearing or the axle assembly or the side and strickers. They're rebuilding that now. We need to have that style stand that they have so that we can do those axle bearings ourselves, because we have in the last few years taken quite a few assemblies over to them to have them rebuild them. So we've got a little time here to be able to work on these other components. I don't know if I'll be able to finish this job in this video or not, but that is what we are working on here at the moment. We do have a tractor with a 7720. Well, we'll get into that. We're jaw jacking too much. Let's just get this wheel weight assembly tore apart, and then we'll talk about that other job that we might be doing during this video. Alright, by removing that wheel weight assembly, that'll allow us to get down in here. We've got to turn this bolt. We at least have to get this little nut keeper out of there, and then we can remove the nut off of that broken bolt, and then we're going to have to heat this hub up. And maybe just throw another nut on there, weld the nut to the broken bolt, and try to pull the bolt out backwards. But it could be challenging, but we've stripped them off before, and you end up putting a standard bolt through there, ream the hole out, and put a nut on the back side. It's a little bit of a fiasco to tighten that wheel up, because you have to reach inside that guy to put a socket on the nut. Now you'll see we've got some fuel in our drip pan here. There's an elbow fitting that we have removed from the side of this fuel tank, or the back side of the fuel tank, and I've got just a standard pipe plug in there, and I removed the elbow so I could get that housing out without breaking the fuel tank, and that is dripping. I probably should pull that out, put some Teflon on it, and put that plug back in there, but that's dripped some fuel. So we'll try to get this dug out here. All right, so that was not successful, welding the nut on the back side to pull that bolt out through. The bolt is broke off down in about 1.5 inches. And it is broke off on the other side of the thread. So I don't have, it's all, even if it was broke off out here, there's quite a bit of thread. There's about that much thread that was still on the broken bolt. So that wouldn't pull out, and I'm done screwing around with it. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna use the Oxy Lance torch, and we're gonna blow a hole right through that, get that bolt out of there, and then we'll clean the threads up after the fact. Alright, so I used a used rod. It wasn't only 8 inches long. We blasted a hole through there, and it has had time to cool down now. I think I might need to blow through that again, but we are blown right through. And I'm going to take a punch now and see if I can drive that bolt out. You can just barely see daylight through the back side. You ought to be able to see, yeah, you can see daylight coming through. There's no guarantee as to what kind of shape the threads are going to be in, but we really don't need them to be all that great anyways, because we're just going to put a bolt through it. So I'm going to get a punch now, and I'm going to try to punch out the remains of what is in there. All right, so I hit it the second time with that Lance torch, and we've got a hole through it now. It's not all that clean, but we suspected that, we had suspected that it wasn't going to be that great anyways. We'll give some time we'll give it some time to cool down, get our torch put away, and we'll try running a tap in that. But I don't suspect them threads are going to be any good. Now, we were talking about this gear here that you would run on the axle, and I had explained to you that this bolt here was set up, and we're going to show you so you can believe it for yourself that it is mucho set up. So we've got to get that going as well, so that we can put this damn thing back together. At least it's moving some, but it needs cleaned up. So let's get this stuff put away and we'll see what we can do with the back side of them threads. Alright, so I kind of lucked out and we've got that hole all cleaned up. Cleaned all the slag out of it. And I ran a tap down all three holes here. So I've got a 20mm bolt. And of course that threads into here nicely. Goes into all three holes very nicely. So what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to put a longer bolt in there than what they originally had in there. And then we will put, we'll stack some washers and a nut on the other side, just so that we're sure that it stays in there. It's supposed to have a locked nut on the other side so that if it was ever to loosen up, the wedge wouldn't fall out. So we've got to free this bolt here up. We're going to pull these two bolts here out, and we're going to clean those threads up as well. And I'm going to put 5 brand new bolts in here. These 2 bolts here, all they do is you drive them in after you've got these other ones loose, and they push against the hub to pull the wedge out. So we'll clean that up, get that tore apart, and then what we can do is put our wheel weight back on the other side and get that secured down. And then we can pull this wheel out of the way. And we have to do the same thing, more or less, to the dual hub extension, or the dual hub itself. I want to put all brand new bolts in that as well, because they're rusty. And the trouble with taking rusted bolt in and out too many times is after a while, the threads go to hell and it screws itself up. So we might as well lay this down and dig these other ones out. Actually, we don't have to lay it down. We can just leave it like that. So now we are ready to put the wheel weight back on. Got our bolt dug out, that center bolt on the 3-bolted wedge. And then I've got the bolts out of the wedge that has the cutout in it for the adjuster to move the hub on the axle. We were able to get that adjuster bolt worked back and forth, and we oiled the hell out of it. Got that freed up. I ran a tap down through all 5 holes. They're nice and clean now. Now we'll go ahead, we'll put the wheel weight on, and then we could set this wheel out of the way. And then what I need to do is dig the bolts out of the dual hub, send a tap down through those 6 holes. Then we could put our parts off to the side. I want to get the piston put into this, get that set up, get our brake disc and everything on there. Now when this dual hub, when this axle comes back, we can put it on the tractor. So let's get our wheel weight lifted back up, get that setting on there. Probably got to take a little doing because we're going to be setting it on the bolts that are in the cast hub already. So let's see if we can do this with one pick. All right, now we can put our bottom wedge in, or the wedge that only has the 2 bolts in it that goes around this adjuster bolt. And as you can see, we've got this all freed up here now. There was quite a bit of rust in these 2 holes here, and it took quite a bit to get this freed up. So we'll clean all this up, anti-seize everything, get our wedge back in place. If we at least get this wedge in there and then wait to put this one in until it's on the tractor, because we could put it on. We don't necessarily have to get it clocked at that point, and then turn the wheel on the axle, get it clocked, and then put this wedge here back in, being that that has the key to it right there. All right, so we'll do some cleanup here, and maybe throw some paint on that at the same time here. Well, we're ready to install the piston into the differential housing. We've got a new O-ring in there, new O-ring on the piston, and we have this inner wheel hub assembly is all ready to go onto the tractor once we get the axle back. We've got all the threads cleaned up. We had a broken bolt in one of these wedges. I don't know if it was that one or the one that's going to be in the top part of the wheel. We had a broken bolt in that. We dug that out. Now what we're going to do is put the piston in. I've got this angle iron made up, and it has holes in it for the smaller differential housing and the larger ones. There's 2 holes here. We're going to use that one and that hole there. What we'll do is we'll bolt the angle iron in there. We'll set the piston in. We'll bolt the angle iron up, put little blocks of wood in between the angle iron and the piston, and then we'll run it in with an impact. We have to overpower the piston over the top of the machine surfaces to get that to, it's a tight fit. Sometimes you can do it with a you know, one of these blow type hammers. You can whack it in there, but it takes so damn long to get it in there. I have found that it is just better to press it in. So we'll go ahead and get it ready to go in. Well, we're just letting this brake disc soak in some oil for a moment. I have used a rag to go around those brake discs to get them soaked in oil. And the last time I did this with a plastic bag, it didn't work so good. The bag had holes in it. This bag isn't all that thick, but most of the time they come in a thicker bag than that, and it works really well. And then when you get done oiling it, you can just pour that oil out of that bag right into the transmission. So we'll let that soak for a little while. We've got a couple of three return springs to put in. They'll go in these holes here. Where are we? Here. Bang, bang, and bang. And then we'll put the brake disc on, and then the there's like a pressure plate that goes on the back side. Now when we took that one apart, it had an ear broke off. So I don't know what would have caused that, but I suppose jacking on the brakes fast and hard could break that off. And if it would have broke the other two off, that would just spin in there and it wouldn't allow that to activate the actual brake. So we'll get these guys put in there. They're just little return springs. I removed the old ones. The old ones could probably get used again, but we're going to all this trouble. You might as well put new components back in.